How do you maximize your interval training? When people think about interval training, they normally think about the number of reps, how long the rest periods are, and the pace or intensity that you try and maintain with each interval. And think about it. Using these variables, you can develop a really solid interval session. However, is there something else we're missing? What happens if we start changing the intra-interval pacing? And we do that in order to try and target specific physiological adaptations. Now, to be clear, by changing the intra-interval pacing, what I mean is we could start off really hot, really fast, and start to slow down as the interval goes on, or we start slow and start increasing the pace or intensity as the interval goes on. And this is clearly very different from our traditional way of doing intervals, where we try and maintain a certain pace over the entire interval. I'm Dr. Phil Price. I am a senior lecturer in strength and conditioning and biomechanics at St Mary's University, and I am the host of the Progress Theory. And stay tuned for the rest of this video, because I'm going to go into detail as to why you may want to use intra-interval pacing for your interval sessions. But before we go into that, I want to talk about my new book, The Science of Hybrid Training, which is available on Amazon, and there is a link below. In this book, we detail what hybrid training is and also discuss the mechanisms behind the interference effect. And we start to understand that the interference effect shouldn't be feared like it originally has been. We can train for a strength sport and an endurance sport at the same time. And this book goes into the science as to why and discusses some principles and programming factors that we can use to really maximize our hybrid training. If you're interested in hybrid training, please check out this book. If not, please give this channel a subscribe and a like. It'll be really appreciated. Okay, so to understand why we might want to use intra-interval pacing, we need to have a bit of an understanding of the physiology behind it. So let's use someone performing an interval, for example. When we train, the muscles require oxygen to develop the energy necessary for muscular contraction. The body sends oxygenated blood to the working muscle. Oxygen diffuses from the blood in the surrounding capillaries into the muscle cell. And then this is used by the mitochondria to generate energy. So for this to happen very effectively, we need a strong and fatigue-resistant respiratory system with good breathing technique, an excellent cardiopulmonary system to ensure that high volumes of oxygenated blood are delivered to the working muscles, and excellent extraction and utilization of oxygen by the muscle cells. And how we utilize intra-interval pacing may bias certain physiological adaptations. And this is what I mean. Let's use the ascending strategy first as an example. So for an ascending strategy, i.e. we start low and get faster as the interval goes on, we are trying to improve the delivery of oxygen to the working muscles. And the ascending strategy allows that because we are creating a gradual oxygen desaturation. What we're trying to do is use this ascending strategy to ramp up the cardiovascular system. So this initiates a state where initially the supply of oxygen is greater than the utilization of oxygen in the muscle cell. Oxygen supply greater than extraction and utilization, at least initially. Now this tries to bias specific physiological adaptations which tries to improve the delivery of oxygenated blood. For example, the vasodilation of the capillaries surrounding the muscle, improved muscle relaxation, because this creates a steadier blood flow rate and helps clear any waste products, and this gradual increase in breathing helps the respiratory pump, which causes a decrease in central venous pressure, which in turn promotes greater venous return. Any increases in venous return in turn leads to an increased stroke volume and therefore cardiac output. So let's do a very simple example. Say we're on a rower and we're doing 8 intervals of 500 meters. Say what we'd normally do is try and maintain a pace of 1 minute 40 for every 500 meters. So that's going to be our mean pace. We're going to start much easier. So we're going to start at 1 minute 50. And then as the 500 meters progresses, we're going to move to 140 in speed and then to 130 in speed. So if we have our mean pace, we're going to start slower than that mean pace and end faster than that mean pace. So we get this gradual increase. So if that's the ascending strategy, what happens if we start using the descending strategy? So we start really hot, really fast, and then we slow it down as the interval progresses. Now, because the intensity is much harder in the beginning, that places a lot more emphasis on the respiratory system. As you start at a higher intensity, oxygen utilization and extraction at the muscle is greater than the oxygen supply. So you get this oxygen debt. So the body responds to this by increasing the ventilation rate. It tries to breathe more quickly because the demand for oxygen has just been completely outstripped. It realizes there's a deficit. and the respiratory system starts to act by increasing breathing rate to try and get more oxygen to the working muscles. And the idea behind using a descending strategy is that we're trying to train the strength and endurance of the diaphragm and the inspiratory and expiratory muscles. And the slow decrease across the interval allows the athlete to practice maintaining control with their breathing and let the respiratory system gradually strengthen to try and catch up. We're giving it a chance to aid the delivery of oxygen to the working muscles. So if we look at a descending strategy, keep this really simple again. Let's say we're doing 6 intervals on a bike. Let's just say that the usual pace is 1:30 over 500 meters, and each interval lasts around 5 minutes. You'd spend the first third of that interval above the average pace, so around 120. Around the midpoint, you decrease it to about 130, and then the last third of that interval, you would have it around 140. So you get this gradual decrease in intensity. Now, I recommend everyone to give these intra-interval pacing strategies a try and see how they develop your hybrid training. However, I'd like to highlight that these strategies should be used as part of a complete endurance program, which also includes low intensity training and other high intensity training as well. However, these approaches could be used quite effectively if you believe there's a limitation in the delivery of oxygen or in your respiratory system. It's a great way of just changing your interval sessions just to bias that type of physiological adaptation you are trying to achieve. Anyway, if you've used this type of training before, let me know in the comments. And if you like this type of content, please give the Progress Theory a subscribe. I see you in the next video.